fine. Good evening, everyone. My name is. Okay, nice. Yeah, recording. Right. Network. Okay, Evelyn. Right. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Time is 17:57. 6th of May 2026. So, to introduce myself, is my name is Onele Nkangezi. I'm recently graduated from a UCT with a Bachelor of Science majoring in chemistry and computer science. So you could say I know a little bit of maths, high school maths that is. So today we'll be continuing with a trigonometry. Right. So in the past recordings, I've dwelled a little bit much on a theoretical part of a trigonometry, right? Covering concepts such as periodicity, SOHCAHTOA, amplitude, all those what you call this word? All those jargons that are found on trigonometry, right? So today I won't be covering much of theory, but I'll be explaining to you on how to sort of address the trigonometric questions and how to approach them. And I want you to actually focus on my thought process when I'm answering such questions, right? Right. Okay, so the very first question that we are going to be dealing with today is coming from grade 11 paper 2 of 2018, November 2018 exam, right? Question 4. Okay, let's go to question 4. Right, so question 4. Let's take a look at question 4. In the diagram, F2 negative 2, G5 2, and C6Y are the vertices of triangle FGC. FG is perpendicular to FC. N is a point on FG such that the inclination of NC is 104,04 degrees. The angle of inclination of FG is beta, and angle FNC is equal to theta, right? One might say, when looking at this question, but there's nothing involved with trigonometry because we don't see any of trig functions, sine, cos, or theta. But I would beg to differ because this entire question is based on a trigonometry as much as you don't see any trig functions or trig ratios rather. But this is a trigonometric question simply because it includes E angles. Yeah, well. So as soon as you see angles, you should think of a trigonometric functions. You understand? Right. So the very first question, it's saying calculate the gradient of FG. Right. On the previous videos, I've explained on how you can calculate the gradient of a line, of a straight line. Yeah. So there are two ways to actually calculate the gradient of a straight line. You can calculate using the angle of inclination with respect to x-axis, right? Such as, for example, 104.04 is the angle of inclination of the line NC. right? So we may make use of this angle to actually calculate the gradient of NC. Or there's another way to actually calculate a gradient where you are given 2 points that are found on the line, 2 separate points that are found on the line. And then you use those 2 points to calculate gradient, right? So let's go on and calculate the gradient of FG. So how can we calculate OFG? So which of the two ways that we know to use to calculate the gradient? Is it the one that has to do with the angle, or the one that has to do with 2 points? Yes, you're correct. The one that has to do with 2 points, because we are given 2 points on the line FG, which is point F and point G, right? So let's proceed and calculate the gradient, right? So we know that when you are given 2 lines, you are using this form m, which stands for gradient, is equals to change in y over change in x, right? So we are given point F, which is, let's go back, 2 minus 2, 2 minus 2, and root g, 5 to 2, right? Let me just confirm it's 5 2. Yes, it's 5 2. So another person may be confused what this triangle stands for, yeah? In front of y and in front of x. So basically this triangle is a Greek symbol. Maths tends to use a lot of Greek symbols such as alpha, beta, delta, etc., etc. Understand? So this triangle represents a Greek symbol which is known as ut delta, ne? So this is a low alphabet, ne? By what I mean by low is that, for example, A, this is a capital letter of A, yeah, and then this is a low letter of A. So the capital letter of delta is represented like this, ne? But that besides the points, ne? So this triangle, ne? Don't be confused. It simply means just change. Delta means change in mathematics, usually, but not all the time. Let's go on and proceed and answer it. So it's y2 minus y1. It's the difference, it's the change. Okay, wait. x2 minus x1, right? So we're gonna take, so this is f, by the way. We're gonna take this as 0.2 and this is 0.1. So y2 is minus 2, y2, y1, x2, x1. So minus 2 minus 2, right? Over 2 minus 5. And then we get minus 4 over minus 3, which is negative. Yeah, they cancel each other. Then you get 4 over 3, which is 1/3. Right. So we know the gradient of FG, that it's 4 over 3. Right. So I will just erase all this. So we have answered question 1, the very first question. So as you can see, this question it's just a giveaway. It's just giving you free marks. So you don't play with such questions because you might be you might need this mark of such questions for you to actually pass. You understand? So don't what you say? Don't take such questions for granted. Make sure that you understand them and you know how to answer them. You understand? Let's move on to the next question. Calculate the value of y. Right. So this is a bit of a higher order question, right? How can we calculate y? Right. Okay. So let's just take note of my thought process because this is the first time I'm answering the question. I don't really know straightforward how to answer it, but let's analyze it, what we know. Okay, we have calculated the gradient of fg, right? And we can calculate the gradient of nc. How? Using the other formula to calculate the gradient, which gradient is equals to tan theta. So the gradient of nc is tan 104,04, right? Let's actually write this down. Yeah, this is question 4.2. So let's write all our data. Yeah? So gradient of nc is equals to tan of 104. Right, okay, wait. No, what am I doing? Okay, wait. Okay, let's just clear this up. Gonna use this space. How do you just clearly wait all the way on just one click?
Clear all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think no reset canvas.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So okay, let's write down the answer of 4.1. So gradient of fg is 4 over 3. 4.2 now. So we know that we can calculate the gradient of nc. Wait. Gradient of nc using this formula of tan theta, but theta way 2 we have its value as 104,04. Right. So the question is, let's calculate what you call the y coordinate of c. Right. So we know a gradient of fg and of nc. Right. So how do we calculate this? Okay. We are also given that fc is perpendicular to fg. So what do we know about perpendicular lines on a Cartesian plane. So we know that the product of their gradient is equal to -1, right? So let me write this down, what I mean by product. So this is one fact. So the product of gradient of fg, so product means multiplication, and of fc is equals to -1, right? So since we know the gradient of fg, we can calculate the gradient of fc. So gradient of fc is equals to -3/4. So that's fact number 2. So basically I'm writing down all of my all facts that I can that I know, rather all facts that I know. You write them down. fc is gradient, it's equal to -3/4. Right, what other fact can we get from this? Okay, we can also calculate the gradient of UTC since we have 2 points that are given. Oh wait, we can't. Why? Because we don't know the y coordinate. Okay, that's interesting, right? Okay. Okay, so we can calculate the angle of a beta, right? You can calculate the angle of a beta, right? And also we can, after calculating this, we can calculate this angle of a beta. We can also calculate this angle here, angles on a straight line, 180 degrees is equals to 104,04 plus this. So after calculating these two triangles, we can then proceed calculating the angle theta, right? So after calculating the angle theta, we can then calculate this angle right here, FCN, right? Yeah, okay, so that's the data we have. Right, so in gradient. Okay. Let's think through. It hasn't clicked as of yet. Okay, is there something I'm missing? Okay, no, there's nothing I'm missing. So this is a point of intersection of our 3 lines, right? Okay, so we know that NC and FC are are intersecting at C, and we know the gradient of FC and of, okay, we don't know. So if we were to extend this line, like what will gradient be? Let's write it down, okay. So, so these are called effects, effects or data. All right. Okay, yeah. Yeah, black, that'll be fine. Right. Okay, let's calculate u beta. Let's just calculate u beta. Right. So how do we calculate u beta next? So we know that gradient fg is equals to 4 over 3, ne? But we also have this other way to calculate, but in this case is u beta instead of u theta, ne? 4 over 3. So we can calculate u beta, ne? Beta is tan minus 1 over 4 over 3. Wait, kwenza lantoni? Yenza ntoni? 4 over 3, and then we get to beta weight 4 over 3. Then just write this down on your calculator, then you'll get the value of beta. Right. But let's calculate of the angle theta, right? So since we know the value of beta, and we also know this angle, now let's call this angle, we're gonna call it alpha. So we know that 104.0, okay, let me just, how do you, we know that 104.04 plus alpha is equals to 180 degrees. The reason why, angles on a straight line. Angles on straight line. Yeah? Line, right. So the value of theta weight is 180 minus 104.04. It's 75.06. Yeah. So we have found alpha and we have found beta. So then there's also this theta plus beta plus alpha is equals to what? 180 degrees. Do you know why? Because sum of the angles of interior triangle is 180 degrees. So the sum of beta, theta, and alpha is equals to 180. And since we know beta and alpha, we can therefore calculate theta. So theta weight to then becomes 180 minus b plus alpha. Ne? So let me write this down on the whiteboard. Ne? So since we have calculated beta, alright, so theta is equals to 100 and, what's happening now? 180 minus beta plus alpha, alright? So So 180 minus, I'm gonna just write this as it is, tan 4/3. Please take note of this negative one. This is not tan, but it's an inverse of tan. Plus 75,06. How do you move? Come in. Comma 06. And then you'll get the answer of a theta, so which would have answered to 4.3. Ne? Also another fact, ne? If you note, I haven't answered 4.2. Ne? If you stuck upon the answer, ne? And you do not have an immediate direction on how to answer it, the best thing for you to do is actually to move on to the next question. And if perhaps you can answer the next question, then maybe you can have an idea on how to answer the previous question. Don't sit around and stuck on one question, because time is limited. Usually you have 3 hours to answer all of this question paper, and move on to the next question if you have no idea on how to answer the question. Usually, at first glance of a question, you already know the way forward on how to calculate it. And if you just invest up to 2 minutes on trying to think of a way forward on how to answer a question, but if no way forward is appearing on your brain, move on to the next question, and try to answer it. But then, of course, there are such questions that in order for you to answer them, you must know the answer of the previous questions. If you meet such questions, move on to the next question, such that it won't require you to know the answer of the previous question. All right. So let's rub this off. So we have calculated angle theta. Calculate the length of NC. Right. Okay, let's go to 4.2. I think I have figured out on how to answer 4.2. You see what I was meaning when move on to the next questions. Maybe the answer of the previous question will appear. The answer of 4.2, or rather the approach on how to answer 4.2, has just appeared on my brain. Okay, so how can we actually answer 4.2? Right. So let's first look at n. Where does n lie on line FG? Yes, it lies somewhere in the middle of FG, right? But now the funny thing is, it is not explicitly said that, or rather stated, that to n is the midpoint of FG. But looking at your diagram, you can see, or rather it's safe to assume that to n is the midpoint of FG. So one of the reasons they did not state it like explicitly that n is a midpoint of fg is simply because they have shown you a diagram. The diagram tells you that, or rather shows you that n lies somewhere in the middle of line fg. So with that being said, it's safe to assume that n is a midpoint of fg, right? But for verification purposes, we're gonna go back to a memo. Fortunately, we are given a memo of the question papers to verify that indeed n is a midpoint. We're gonna go back to memo, but I'm pretty sure that n is a midpoint of fg. So assuming that n is a midpoint of fg, let's go on and calculate the coordinates of n. So how do we calculate the coordinates of n? So we have what is known as midpoint theorem. I don't know whether it's a theorem or a what, but midpoint theorem. Yeah. So what does midpoint theorem say? Midpoint theorem says that given 2 points, let's say I'm gonna draw a Cartesian plane. Given 2 points, j random 2 points, and you are given their coordinates. Just call it to x2, y2, and x1 and x2. Now, the question is then, what are the coordinates that lie on the middle of on the middle of these 2 points? So if you were to draw a straight line, okay, pardon my straight line. So our midpoint of this between of these 2 points would lie somewhere here, right? So how do we calculate? Let's call this A, call this point B, and call this point C. How do we calculate the coordinates of a point C? So the coordinates of a point C are calculated by the following way. So it's x1 plus x2 over 2, midpoint, y1 plus y2 over 2, and then you will get the coordinates of point C. So let's go on and calculate coordinates of n. Right. So we know that n lies between point F and point G. So point F, let's look at point F. Okay, we did not write their coordinates, but we know that point F is 2 minus 2, and node G is 5, 2. Right, so if n is a midpoint between F and G, so that means the coordinates of n is 2, this right here, and plus 5, this right here, over 2, and minus 2 plus 2 over 2. And then when you simplify this, 2 plus 2 over 2 gives you 7 over 2, which is 3.5. Just write it as point form. So minus 2 plus 2. Wait, what? So we might wait, okay, because minus 2 plus 2 is equate to 0. Okay, no, that you do not actually add, but you subtract. Yeah. Do you add or you subtract? Wait. Let me first get this coordinate straight. Minus 2. I think you subtract, yeah. So pardon me, guys. Given 2 points, ne? So midpoint theorem says that ne, midpoint ne, let's say it's a point between A and B. So it's actually ax minus bx over 2 over ay ne, minus by over 2. Wait, minus 2 ne? Yeah. Something was not making sense. Yeah. So this is the formula of a midpoint. Okay, let me actually verify it, because I don't want to be incorrect. Midpoint theorem. Actually plus. No, it's not minus. Oh God. Pardon me. So it's not minus. Yeah, I was correct. Wait. Something. So it's plus. What? Y1 plus y2. Minus 2. Something is not right up. The reason why I'm confused, guys, is because just ignore n for now. But if you were to actually calculate the midpoint of fg, you would get something like this. Let's call it n. We'll get 2 plus 5 over 2. And then you'll get 2 plus minus 2 over 2. And upper you'd get 3.5. But here 2 plus minus 2 will be 0. So will be 0 over 2, which is 0. So this will be this would be the coordinates of n, or rather of a midpoint, which is 3.5 over 0. But looking at so 0 since since our midpoint its y coordinates is 0, that means it lies on the x-axis, right? So on the x-axis y is 0. So a midpoint of OFG would actually be somewhere here. But looking at our diagram, this point cannot be midpoint here too. So with that being said, it is rather safe to assume that something is wrong with this question. But we're gonna check in the memo on how they actually did answer 4.2. So with that, ne, I cannot really answer 4.2. Ne? But let's assume, ne, but for the sake of trying to answer 4.2, let's assume that this y value, it's any number but to 0. Ne? Let's call this number oy. Let's rather oy1, yeah, oy1. Ne? So ne, I'm still trying to show you on how to actually answer 4.2. Ne? So we have calculated this point n, right? Right. So we have calculated the point n. So now, how do we then calculate y, this y here? So answer after we have calculated this point here un, and we know a gradient of nc. So we're gonna use the fact that the gradient A2 is equals to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1, right? So we know the value of our gradient, that it's an inverse of 104,04, which is equals to, so y, okay, let's call this y2 instead of y1. So y2a2, which is y2 minus y, over 3.5 minus 6. So let me write this much clearer. So we know that. So, excuse me. Since we know the actual value of y2, the only variable that we do not know is oy. And then we can solve for oy algebraically, right? But now, because this question, rather this, one of these 2 points is actually incorrect. It can't be u2 and this can't be u minus 2. Yeah, so if, just to prove you that this is really, so this is, if this is, so this will be minus 2, right? So, but upper, this point here is 2. Look at the distance between these two lines, that the distance is not the same, but it should, O2 should be somewhere here instead of being here. So there's something wrong with this question. I'm definitely sure of that. But moving on, so we have assumed the value of y2, and now we can calculate the value of y, right? So that would be how we would calculate answer of 4.2. If you did not really get me, just rewind 7 minutes or 5 minutes backward, then listen to me carefully what I'm saying, then you'll get what I mean when I say there's something wrong with this question. Even teachers and people who set papers, they also tend to make some mistakes as well. This goes to prove that nobody is really perfect, eh? So where I was, so we have calculated the value of theta. Then we're going to calculate the length of UNC. Right. So the length of NC, ne? So this is one of the questions. For example, to actually answer 4.4, you would need to have answered 4.2, right? So on our assumptions, now we have answered 4.2. So we know point C and we know point N, midpoint, and we've calculated the Y value. Now use distance formula. Distance formula is actually Pythagoras theorem if you look at it. Yeah? Distance of AB equals to square root of what you call this of AX, yeah? AX minus BX squared plus AY minus BY squared. Right, so upper you would then go on and replace coordinates of N and C. So you can say A stands for N and B stands for C. And then you would get the answer of OAB. Right. So that would be how to actually answer this entire question 4, which is worth about 12 marks. So I hope you have understood all this blabbering I've been doing, from calculating gradient of FG and to calculating the length of NC. If you have really not understood, just repeat the video and go back. You will answer it. You'll understand it. But let's go on to a memo to see how did they answer 4.2. Okay, I should have done that, but rather I should have done this. So it was 2018 paper 2. Where is memo? Do we have a memo? Yes, we do. This is paper what? Right, okay, now I see. Okay, we made a little bit of a mistake, ne? So okay, yeah, okay, so that was a miss from my side. So what I did is I used the gradient of this line, ne? I could have simply used the gradient of this line, which I could have calculated because we know that FC is perpendicular to Lewy. Yeah. So I've also wrote it down up somewhere. so nangulo minus 3 over 4 the gradient of fc ne. Since we know the gradient of fc ne, and then we know the other way, that is change of y over change of x, and we know the coordinates of f and the coordinates of, no, not n, why I'm obsessed with n, and we know the coordinates of uc, but we don't know the y coordinate. We then use this formula ne, to calculate that point c. They are showing you here, calculated minus 3 over 4 y plus 2, near that 2y from c and 2 from f, 6 from c minus 2 from f, and then we get minus 5. Yeah. So yeah, this was U beta V2. That's how we calculated it. Beta was correct. And then we right. So upper in this case, yeah, it is not stated that n is the midpoint, so we can't use the straight line distance formula directly, because we don't know the points of n, but we can use trigonometric functions, yeah? And they have used it nicely. Sine theta, so this is a right angle triangle, so sine theta, it's, so if you look at the triangle FNC, you see that NC is our hypotenuse. So sine theta, FC is opposite theta, hypotenuse is NC, is equals to FC over NC, and we have calculated the coordinates, rather the distance of FC, and then you can then calculate the length of NC. So yeah, pardon me guys, I made a mistake. Instead of using the gradient of, rather this line here, ne? I made a slight mistake of using this line, but the way of calculating it, I sort of sensed it, but wait, we actually used the vertical, the gradients, yeah. But now I wanted to actually use a gradient of this, but we can't really use calculate the gradient of NC because we don't know n. So there was obsession that had to do with n. Yeah. I was looking at n like kaku so much, such that I was thinking of NC, but you actually use this line here. So yeah, that was the mistake I used. Right, NC. So yeah, guys, that is it for today's session. We're gonna end it here today. So the time now is 18:51. So we started at 17:57. So it's been long over an hour answering the same question, but of course with explanations. But on the exams, you do not have an hour to answer one question. You have at most up to 20 minutes for a single question. So practice, yabo. Practice. So with practice, you'll get used to like, you get used to a feel of such questions, such that as soon as you see the question, you know the way, or rather the approach to answer it, right? Also learn from the mistake I've just made. Ne? Also learn from it, because it's really a small mistake that I made, but it can cost you a lot of marks. Ne? So work along with those fine tunings, ne? Precision, understanding the questions. Take your time and try to understand the question as a whole before diving in to answer it. So, yeah. So this was an interesting question. Yeah. Yeah. So I hope you got something out of this, and I hope you will learn. So since today is the last day that we are covering trigonometry, right? The next time we are meeting, I think we might cover shapes. Question 8. Such shape the diagram below perpendicular height of blah blah blah. Yeah, we're gonna cover the shapes, ne, curriculum of grade 11. All those shapes, the questions that come along with them. Yeah. Circle geometry, we're gonna wait a bit with it. I know a lot of people, this is where they find difficulty, but trust me, once you understand this and all its theorem, it just becomes easy. So next time we're gonna cover such questions as question 8, questions that had to do with shapes and everything else. So yeah, I'm gonna close the session now. Thanks to everyone who has tuned in. Drop it below. Drop a comment below if there's a mistake that I did that you caught. Comment it down so others can also see the mistake, and also that I can also see my mistake. Yeah, but I doubt there's any mistake I made, but I'm not 100% sure. So that is it for today. Thank you guys for tuning in once again. Thank you. Till next time. Ciao.